the mission of the facility is to open it up for interdisciplinary research, collaboration, get groups from all over campus in one facility to kind of break down some of those silos, those barriers in between disciplines. So in here, you'll go through some of the big labs, and you'll have groups that are primarily CALs right next to groups that are primarily engineering, or we even have a group up on the third floor that is doing archaeological digs, and right next to them is a water resources group. So that's just kind of that broad spectrum in the facility. And IRIC offers, of course, you have our wet labs. The building itself is 70,000 square feet total. About 40,000 square feet of that is actual lab space, but you have wet labs, dry labs, visualization labs. We have this really nice big space right over here, 121, which is our large visualization lab that's got overhead grid systems for cameras, things like that. Our virtual technology lab is working in there right now, but so we have we have fabrication labs, which I just realized not listed on here, but office spaces, and then we have our public and shared spaces, conference rooms. We have 7 conference rooms. We have the atrium where you do presentations in, and then we have the step auditorium for doing presentations, workshops, things like that. So adaptability, of course, the building with that not really knowing what was going to be in the building when it was designed. It was built for adaptability and collaboration in mind. So we have, like, in the wet labs, the lab benches are movable. We can move lab benches around. In the dry labs and the offices, we have a panelized floor system, so we can move power around, whatever the researchers need. I mean, there's certain things we can't do in the building, but it allows us a lot of flexibility to work with research groups of what they need in the facility. And of course, I don't know if you've been over in the IRIC yet, very open, very bright, lots of glass. And that kind of helps that connectiveness because we're right on the main academic mall to have stuff other than research. That's one thing I really like to stress for people, that we are a research facility, but we try to have that connectiveness for events and university celebrations, things like that we'll have in our atrium. So that's kind of fun. Now, the projects in the building are project and program based. They're not researcher based. So we've had some really good faculty members apply for space in the building, but they were only a single faculty member, and the committee's like, no, this is a collaboration. The building's collaborative, and we want the projects to be collaborative. So, but the application process is really quite simple. This is the website here at uidaho.edu. You go through the Office of Research, you'll find the IRIC, and there's the Space Request tab. And it's the initial screening form is quite simple. It basically just lays out asking about what's the project, who's your collaborators, what's the project goal, what kind of space do you need, things like that. The initial form is pretty basic. And I'll help out, I can help out with applications. Of course, the faculty member or the representative from your college can help out answering questions. And like, here's the current faculty right now, or the facility committee. It's a 15-member committee. We have representatives from all the colleges, plus undergraduate research, the library. We have some at-large positions, which are, like, we have Carly Cummings from the Office of Research, Research and Economic Development. We have a lab manager, Dora from CNR on that committee. So really a wide range committee there. It's difficult to kind of wrangle them all together, that many people, but especially you get a lot of the senior faculty, they're pretty busy. But the committee meets once a quarter to review. I give a report what's going on in the building. They review applications. We have one coming up later this month. The deadline to get on that one is April 29th, and then they'll meet again in July. So once a quarter, the committee meets. Now the basic, we're working on this. This is just kind of like the general criteria for space assignment. We're working with a subcommittee right now. We're trying to get it, because we're at a transitional phase in IRIC. Initially, when the building opened, let's get people in the building. We didn't really have a really set criteria, but now that the building, we're at 92% occupied. The committee we're getting like a little more specific criteria, but in general, this is what the committee's looking for. Is the project innovative? Is it interdisciplinary and collaborative? Does it involve external stakeholders? Does it involve students, undergraduate and graduate students? And then is there a reasonable need for space, not just projected need? And what the committee is also looking for is like, is there a need for space that cannot be supplied by the researchers' home colleges? So that's kind of something the committee's really starting to look for. And then the activity, the guiding, kind of some of the guiding principles that I've talked to some of these before is like, does it encourage broad community, involves teams of scholars, multi-disciplinary, institutional, get high priority. Space assignments are the duration of the projects and programs. That's something that the committee is really going to start pushing, because every project has to have an end date. And at that end date, they have to apply again. So, and then we were trying to tell projects, now we're starting to tell them, like, you need to have a plan at that end date. The committee, because even if you're already in the building, you're not on a higher, groups that are applying, new groups are on the same footing as the groups that are already in the building. They're on the same play field. So if you're not a good occupant or and stuff like that, you may not be given space again in the building. So it's just kind of some of the guiding principles. And these are this guiding principles is right from the IRIC Facility Committee bylaws, which is on the IRIC webpage if you're curious of looking at that. So that's just kind of some of the guiding principles. The initial approval is the committee reviews, the application comes in. I just kind of look as a facility manager, look at it, make sure everything's there. I send it on to the committee, they review it. And if they approve it, projects have to move in within 60 days unless there's extenuating circumstances. Like we had a 3D printer that was approved for space up on the second floor, but they had the funding for the 3D printer, but now they're trying to get additional funding for some auxiliary equipment for that. And we're like, okay, we understand. We'll hold the space for you. So there's things extenuating circumstances. Now, some of the things we already tell, I mean, if you're approved for space in the building, you are basically reviewed on a regular basis. Initially, it's like 1 year. We review, make sure the space is being used, is used properly, things like that. And then 1 year, 3 year, and then every 3 years after that if it's a really long project. Unless there's some other issue comes up, and then the chair of the committee or myself or the VP of research can call a review. It's like if there's an incident or other issues. Now, if the project applies for space, but there's no space available, they can be put on a wait list. So they're approved, they're just waiting for space to open up. So that's another option we tell groups. Now, after, if the project's approved, then we move on to a project plan. And the project plan is a little more larger document that talks about descriptions, office of research approvals. That's if you have like human subjects or biosafety, things like that, other risk controls, waste generation. That's a little bit larger, more in-depth document we would go into after the approval. And of course, project plan, the project plan approval depends on how intensive the project is. If it's a really basic project, it would probably just come to me, the facility committee chair, and maybe the representative from that college will review it, say that's good. Now, if it's really intensive project planning, then we might have to get some experts in and do some additional work. But there's some other forms after that, like equipment installation. That's like if there's doing some specialty equipment, co-located hazards. That's it. That's primarily for like our big open bay labs where you have groups right next to each other. We have groups fill out this co-located hazards form, and that's shared with other occupants to know, okay, I'm right next to that project. I have some idea of the hazards that's what's going on in that group right next to me. So that's what that is. Key requests. Another form is like if it's a specialty piece of equipment, that's the core instrument placement request. That's like we have like an electron microscope in the building. That's like specialty, really heavy, like university resource type equipment. That's a special request for that. Then of course, I mean, if it's everyone has to follow the UI policies, of course, general institute permissions. And there is an appeals process. Like if a group applies for space in the building, the committee denies it, they can appeal to the VP of research. The IRIC is actually overseen by the VP, the Office of Research. I'm in the Office of Research Assurances, and so I answer to the ORA, and he answers to the VP of Research. So if there is an incident, they could appeal it. We haven't had one yet, but there is a pathway for people to appeal. Now for short term, we can do some short term space. This would be like 6 months or less, low risk activities. That means like no biological or chemical or radiological type work. This doesn't go to the facility committee. This just goes strictly to me as the facility manager. So you have a pilot study or something like that where you just need a little bit of space. I could potentially help you out depending on what's available. We've had a few short-term projects grow into long-term. So when they hit that 6-month point, they apply for full-term, like a regular project plan, project application, and then they got approved and the project grew from there. So now for other activities, we've had, this is actually a image of our STEP auditorium. So we can have spaces for seminars and poster presentations and team exercises, things like that. University events. Of course, this is a great picture of, this is a few years ago, but this was, we had a workshop for Jazz Fest in the atrium. And so this was a great little, so we could enjoy having those type of activities going on in the IRIC. Again, is a research building, but we do have some event space. And to get conference room or meeting spaces, if you have meetings or workshops or something like that, you can just go to the room reservation form under the IRIC page, and you can request a conference room or the atrium, things like that. Special events we request like 2 weeks out, like we have big events, of course, 2020, and so far this year we haven't had any big events or anything. Matter of fact, the conference rooms have been pretty quiet for the last years. Most of the people are doing things remotely, of course. It's been a strange year. And there's some guidelines on there if you're curious. And then if you just have any questions, you can reach out to me. You can go to the IRIC at U-Idaho email. So if I'm not available, if I'm on vacation, someone's monitoring that email. We do have some preferences for reservations. We could have lean more towards research related and kind of working our way down. Like student study groups, we don't allow during business hours. It's at 5 to 7 outside normal business hours. Will help students groups out or undergraduate research teams, things like that. No classrooms in the building, so we don't really do academic stuff, but one-off things I'll help groups out. Matter of fact, I'm looking out on my work yard here. We set up an exterior conference room out here. We've had a few classes actually use this space out here. So again, 2020 and COVID, we did that in special. So, but a little information, if you need to get a hold of me, that's my actual personal email, my phone number, and just some little details about my background. And that's about it.